The dawn of June 6, 1972, broke over the Hwange colliery not with gentle light, but with a harsh, dry heat that pressed down on the red earth of Matabeleland. The towering headframes stood like skeletal sentinels against the bruising purple sky, their wheels silent for a moment before the day's grim harvest began. A low chorus of bootsteps and murmured greetings in Shona, Ndebele, English, and Tonga filled the air as men emerged from the twilight, men from Rhodesia, from Zambia, from Mozambique, from distant villages and towns across the southern part of the continent. They carried with them the simple tools of their trade, lunch pails, helmet lamps, and the quiet, resigned courage of those who descend daily into the belly of the earth. They exchanged tired smiles, the night shift passing the day shift with a silent transfer of the world's weight. One by one, they stepped into the cage, the iron gates clanging shut with a finality that echoed in the still morning. The engine whined, the cable tensed, and they were swallowed by the ground. Deep within the labyrinth, in the pitch-dark galleries of No. 2 Colliery, the air was thick and warm, smelling of coal dust, damp timber, and sweat. The beams from 100 helmet lamps cut swinging arcs through the perpetual night, illuminating glistening walls of black seam. The only sounds were the distant thump of machinery, the crunch of picks, and the low rumble of conveyor belts moving their endless black rivers. Then, at 9:05 a.m., the earth itself took a breath. A low, subcutaneous rumble, more felt than heard, vibrated through the rock. A moment of utter silence, where every man froze, his lamp fixed on a dancing cloud of dust. Then the world tore itself apart. The first explosion was not a sound, but a wall of pure force. It erupted from the deepest workings, a ravenous dragon of flame and concussed air that roared through the 3 miles of tunnels. Timber supports snapped like twigs. Rail tracks were twisted into surreal sculptures. The very walls of coal were pulverized into a blinding, choking cloud. The force ripped through crosscuts and galleries, seeking every avenue, filling every pocket of life with its incendiary wrath. On the surface, the ground shuddered. A plume of dust and debris shot from the main shaft, blotting out the sun. The scream of the mine's alarm was a frail, human sound against the geologic roar from below. Choices immediate and absolute. In the lamp room, phones screamed. White-faced officials stumbled into the sunlight, staring at the still quivering head frame. A crowd began to form, first a trickle, then a flood of women and children drawn by the tremor and the terrible column of dust. Their cries rose, a counterpoint to the blaring sirens. Rescue teams, their faces set in masks of grim determination, assembled with frantic speed. They strapped on breathing apparatus, their movements practiced yet suddenly clumsy with fear. The first brave teams descended into the still smoking shaft, their lamps probing a transformed and terrifying landscape. What they found was a tomb of heat and twisted wreckage. For hours, they inched forward, calling into the darkness, their voices muffled by the settling dust. Against all odds, they found 8 men, alive, clinging to a pocket of clean air in a shattered air shaft. Their emergence was met with torn cries of joy, a fleeting, cruel mirage of hope that made the surrounding grief all the sharper. That night, no one left the mine. Arc lights were erected, casting long, stark shadows that turned the colliery into a scene from a nightmare. Families huddled under blankets, their eyes fixed on the pit head, praying for a miracle. Prime Minister Ian Smith arrived, his normally rigid face ashen, moving through the crowd with a statesman's hollow comfort. Below, rescue teams dug and clawed. They recovered 3 bodies, brought to the surface with solemn care, each covered blanket a hammer blow to the waiting crowd. But the mine was not done. On the morning of June 7, as shifts changed and exhausted rescuers took a moment's rest, the earth growled again. 2 new explosions, deeper, more violent, erupted from the wounded mine. This time, they carried no flame, only a silent, invisible killer, clouds of dense, poisonous afterdamp, a cocktail of carbon monoxide and nitrogen. It seeped into every crevice, filling the labyrinthine tunnels with a fatal breath. A rescue worker, emerging gasping, tore his mask off and fell to his knees, pointing wordlessly back into the shaft. The message was clear: the mine had sealed itself. To go back in was not rescue, it was suicide. For 2 more days, a terrible silence hung over Hwange. The crowd thinned, not from lost hope, but from the crushing finality of it. On June 9, the general manager, Gordon Livingstone Blevins, a man who looked 20 years older than he had 3 days prior, stood before the press and the families. His voice, stripped of all corporate polish, was a dry rasp. The decision, he said, was made with the concurrence of mining engineers and the government. The tunnels were unstable, flooded with poison. To risk more lives for corpses was unconscionable. 424 men would remain where they fell. The collective wail that rose from the women present was a sound that would haunt every soul who heard it. It was the sound of a grave closing, forever. The grief that followed was national, a dark pall cast over the whole of Rhodesia. In a football stadium near the colliery, on June 11, a mass memorial was held. Over 5,000 people stood under the vast, indifferent sky, black and white, rich and poor, united in shock. Prime Minister Smith, addressing the crowd, voiced the national sentiment: this has cast a gloom over the whole country. Messages of sympathy poured in from a world otherwise politically divided, from Queen Elizabeth II, from the Pope, from the British Foreign Secretary, and from South Africa's Prime Minister, B.J. Vorster. The disaster had written itself into the global consciousness.
I'm Gabriella Smith. Subscribe, like, share, follow. Asante sana. Ciao.
Its origin story is wild. It started off kinda sneaky in early March 2019, just a blob of angry clouds off Mozambique. It came ashore once, got bored, and spent like 5 days just wandering overland, doing loop-de-loops near the border like it was GPS confused. Then, on March 9, it pulled the ultimate fake out. It slid back over the super warm Mozambique Channel and went full superhero villain transformation. It went from a depression to a named storm and then just powered up. Rapid intensification, they call it. I call it terrifying. Within a day, its winds were screaming at 175 km per hour. It had a moment where it seemed to chill, like it was catching its breath, but that was just it getting its act together. By March 14, it hit its final form, a perfect, terrifying swirl with a clear eye and winds so fast they could rip a building apart. When it finally crashed into the coast near Beira, Mozambique, on the 15th, it was delivering a knockout punch the country never saw coming. And the aftermath? That's where the real horror sets in. Beira was ground zero. Pictures looked like a war zone hit by a tsunami, concrete snapped, roofs sailing through the air, and then just water. Everywhere. Brown, churning water swallowing entire cities. Rescue teams were in helicopters, seeing people on rooftops, and they had to make impossible choices because there were just too many. It was pure chaos. Then, as if that wasn't enough, cholera hit. Because when your water is mixed with, well, everything else, disease follows. It was a nightmare on top of a nightmare. Over in Zimbabwe, in places like Chimanimani, it was a different kind of disaster. The mountains just funneled all that rain into biblical flash floods. 1 second, the Nyand River was a river. The next, it was a raging wall of mud and trees and debris, sweeping away houses, bridges, and whole families in the dead of night. Roads vanished. Villages were cut off, totally isolated, with people stranded for days. Some bodies were found weeks later, miles into Mozambique. The scar it left isn't just on the land, you can see it in people's eyes. Like, how do you even start to rebuild from that? The story of Idai isn't about wind speeds or pressure readings. It's about the silence after the roar, the mud-caked photos in broken frames, and the lingering question of how the sky can hold that much rage. It was real, and it was brutal.
I'm Gabriella Smith. Subscribe, like, share, follow. Asante sana. Ciao.
He was remembered as a quiet man. Unassuming. A face you'd forget in a crowd. Jason, a former CID officer who knew the system's every flaw, now a gold miner who understood pressure, and the precise, terrible moment it must be applied. But on a Friday the 13th, the pressure cooker exploded. The air inside the sacred shrine was thick, a palpable cocktail of faith and red dust. White-robed apostolic congregants swayed in a rhythmic chant, a harmony of devotion shattered by the guttural roar of an engine. A white Toyota Allion, sleek and sinister, kicked up a storm of earth. The door swung open. Jason stepped out, his eyes twin voids of purpose. He moved with a chilling, direct trajectory toward the prophet, Apostle CID. From the frozen crowd, a shattered whisper cut the silence. "What have you done, my son?" It was his own mother. Jason's gaze did not waver. His command was a low, cold edict: leave. And as the faithful scattered like leaves before a storm, he returned to his car and drove away, cool as you like. It was the first, chilling overture of a symphony of chaos. The state responded. Police, led by Inspector Maxwell, a good man, a believer in order, raced to intercept the chaos. They found him parked, engaged in a casual conversation. A facade of normalcy. As the officers boxed him in and Inspector Hove moved to step out, MUVEVI acted with preternatural speed. He didn't run. He raised his weapon. 3 shots. The passenger window exploded into a constellation of glass. Inspector Hove was gone before his feet touched the ground. Another officer, Tendai, was ripped apart. The remaining lawmen, stripped of their courage, dropped their service weapons and fled, leaving their arms behind like offerings to a vengeful god. And Jason? He drove off, not to hide, but to a bottle store. There, he saw a young barman, Munasha, laughing with friends. Jason called him over. They shared a calm, quiet exchange. And then, he shot him. The motive was a question mark lost to the encroaching madness. The nation erupted. Police bulletins flooded the airwaves, armed and dangerous. Approach with extreme caution. The man had become a ghost, a phantom haunting the highways in a white Allion. The next day, a breakthrough. A tense standoff in Rusape erupted into a shootout worthy of a spaghetti western, bullets pinging off metal in a deadly staccato. When the smoke cleared, the white sedan sat abandoned, scarred and silent. The man was gone. Vanished. He resurfaced at a high school in Mutare, barefoot, clad in a brand new blue work suit, a grotesque parody of a laborer. His mind had fully uncoupled from reality. He told terrified staff he was there to hunt baboons. He banged on doors, demanded food, offered a $10 bill for a chicken, a man playing at being a man. When one man, Raphael, made a move for a hoe handle, Jason didn't hesitate. 3 shots. One missed its mark and punched straight through a geyser tank, which erupted in a furious, hissing scream, a near-biblical portent of his escape. Now a cornered, feral animal, he fled into the shadows. Under the cover of a moonless night, he pressed his gun into the back of a Mozambican motorcyclist. "Take me to Chimoio," he commanded. "I'll pay you $200. The cyclist, in a moment of surreal compliance, later recalled the killer's chilling rationale. He said he is a criminal in Zimbabwe, not Mozambique. His arrest was anticlimactic. The man in the blue work suit was finally caged. Handcuffed. The nightmare, it seemed, was over. But the courtroom revealed a deeper, darker truth. This was not his beginning. Over a year earlier, in a quiet Harare suburb, he had allegedly executed a woman named Idai, for no reason at all. The charges stacked like bricks: 4 murders, 2 attempted murders. A nation held its breath, demanding justice. Then, the final, mind-bending twist. Ballistic tests cleared him of 6 other, unrelated murders. He was a killer, but not that killer. His lawyers made their move. A team of doctors delivered their diagnosis. The magistrate's gavel fell. But it did not pronounce a sentence of guilt. It decreed insanity. Jason, the quiet man who became a one-man apocalypse, was not a criminal in the eyes of the law. He was simply mad. He was led away, not to a prison cell, but down the sterile, silent hallway of a psychiatric hospital, the final, soundproof fortress for a mind that had shattered long before the first shot was ever fired. The door clicked shut. The silence that followed was louder than any gunshot.